Tonight, Gina has turned into a remnant low in the South Pacific, and once again we're monitoring the Bay of Bengal for potential formation later this week. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for May the 22nd. Well, this evening across the wide world of tropics, it is very quiet. Only the remnants of Gina marked on this map, and we only have one area of interest marked at this time. However, models are indicating we could be looking at some formation potentially in a basin like the Eastern Pacific this week. So let's jump into the basins, why don't we? On day 10, this is day 10 days left, that is, until hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. Time is running out for an early season storm. Let's hope it doesn't do that, but the Atlantic is fairly quiet. There are some models trying to hint at something forming in the Gulf over the next 48 to 72 hours, although the chances of that are very low at this time, and there's no reason to mark an area of interest at this time. In the Eastern Pacific on day 8 of hurricane season, it's fairly quiet here, and that may change as ensembles towards the 5-day time period are starting to hint that we could be looking at not only one, but maybe two areas of formation. So we'll have to definitely keep an eye on that one. Maybe the Eastern Pacific is finally going to get that start this week. In the Western Pacific, it is fairly quiet here. We had an area of interest last night on our tropical weather outlook on Twitter, but the guidance for that has since dropped significantly, and we have, as such, dropped that AOI. In the North Indian Ocean, a new AOI has been marked, a 10% region in the northern Bay of Bengal. This is going to be similar to 93B, it looks like. That sort of spun up real quick. By the way, we do have that as a tropical storm, as you can see why we have a tick up on that number of tropical storms this season. So that's going to be a very similar situation to where we could get a little bit of a spin up there before it makes landfall. In the South Pacific, it's fairly quiet here. Gina should be the last storm of the season, and nothing after Yakikan in the South Atlantic. This is just a leftover floater that I left in here. If any of you are wondering, Yakikan is gone, and nothing is active in the South Atlantic. No AOIs current, and none in the future, at least for the next 5 days. Looking towards the satellite imagery across the Atlantic Basin tonight, it is fairly quiet here. The most notable thing in this entire loop is really that bundle of thunderstorms in the Gulf of Mexico. It's that system that models are trying to say that could form before it goes onto the Gulf Coast, like I mentioned earlier, but the conditions are looking against it. Just take it with a grain of salt. It's why we haven't marked an area of interest, and I don't think the NHC will either. In the Eastern Pacific, it is fairly quiet here, just some general thunderstorm activity well out to sea. Nothing signifying tropical cyclone formation at this time, but again, we could start to see that change towards the 5-day period. In the Western Pacific, it is fairly quiet here as well as the sun rises here. Just some general thunderstorm activity along what looks to be a frontal system from Japan all the way into Luzon in the Philippines, and even some thunderstorm activity across the South China Sea and west into the Bay of Bengal. But the Indian Ocean generally is quiet tonight, and you'll see that right as this changes right about now. The Indian Ocean is fairly quiet here. Nothing really signifying tropical cyclone formation at this time. We're looking more towards the day 3 to 5 time frame for that system to potentially try and spin up. As of right now, we're all quiet, but that system, regardless of development, could bring some heavy rainfall. And our custom floater tonight is the eastern United States, as an impressive scene is taking place with all that thunderstorm activity, severe thunderstorms across multiple states. Very tall, cold cloud tops aloft, and even as I'm recording this, I can hear thunderstorms outside. They're just keeping on going out along that frontal boundary. Here's the sea surface temperatures across the Eastern Pacific. It is fairly warm here, especially where it matters this time of year across Mexico. 28 to 29, maybe even 30 degrees Celsius there along the coastline. In the Atlantic and the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, generally 27 to 28, maybe some areas of 29 degrees Celsius there. And the rest of the Atlantic is generally warming up, and it will continue to do that up towards peak season in September. Getting to the Indian Ocean, let's look at the very warm Indian Ocean, as it always is, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius generally across the region, although that's not really saying much considering not many tropical cyclones managed to form especially this time of year with the monsoonal activity. But again, we could see some formation in the sea surface temperatures for that area of interest. Very warm in the Western Pacific, across the entire basin. It is very warm, generally 29, 30 degrees Celsius across the entire basin. So very warm, very favorable if a tropical cyclone were to form with the atmospheric conditions, but at this time we're just not seeing it. It's been a quiet May after Malakas and Maggie. Here's the sea surface temperature anomalies, and the main dominating feature again is the La Nina, and I did notice a big change from the last time I did a tropical weather bulletin. The Bay of Bengal looks to be a bit below average in the central and southern part right now. Maybe that's a bit contributed to by Asani earlier this month. So that's a little interesting thing to note. In the Atlantic Basin on the oceanic heat content, it is slowly increasing. But again, as I mentioned in my last tropical weather bulletin, storms typically this time of year don't take advantage of the oceanic heat content. You really look towards peak season, August, like September, like storms like Ida last year, which took advantage of the oceanic heat content. We don't really see storms this time of year in the Atlantic take advantage of the oceanic heat content, but it's a different story in the Western Pacific and Eastern Pacific. We can see storms take advantage of those oceanic heat content values a lot, and we saw that in the last tropical weather bulletin I did with Super Typhoon Hagibis. We don't have nearly as strong of storms tonight on this day, by the way. We're looking back to 2012, 10 years ago. Weird to think that's been 10 years ago, since 2012. But you can see tropical storms Bud, Alberto, and Sanvu were active across the northern hemisphere. Bud is the main focusing part, as it would become a beautiful Category 3 hurricane and would get very close to Mexico. Didn't make landfall as a tropical cyclone, but it was very close to doing so. And that image below Bud is the imagery at peak, courtesy of our image scout lead, Isaac G. And getting to the naming list tonight, the Atlantic Basin is still looking out for Alex. I hope that stays for quite a while. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Agatha. Will that come soon? We'll have to see if that does occur. Models are indicating we could be looking at some formation soon. And in Central Pacific, the next name is still Hone. In the Western Pacific on list 4, we're looking out for Shaba. In Central Pacific, North Indian Ocean, I mixed up basins there, we're looking out for Satrang. And getting to the Southern Hemisphere, we might be done, although maybe not. Some models are starting to hint that we could see a brief system form in the AU region. By the way, AU region, we're looking out for Darien. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Letlama. In the South Pacific, we're looking out for Hale or Hale, however you say that. Thank you so much for watching this Tropical Weather Bulletin. I'll have another one tomorrow night.